Hey everyone, Rob here. First of all, I just want to thank you for listening and supporting Diabetics Doing Things. We are going on 8 years of recording these podcasts. So your support means everything. We would not be here without you. Just wanted to call your attention to a few things that we're working on lately that are updates to Diabetics Doing Things. The first is we are throwing events, and you can find more about our events at diabeticsdoingthings.com/events. We launched our first event in April of 2023. It was a coffee house roastery tour and latte art class. And we have two very exciting events coming up in the fall of 2023, including our first ever, so our inaugural National Diabetes Awareness Month event. And those are going to be on diabeticsdoingthings.com/events this month. So be sure to check those out. Also, if you have a question that you want Eritrea and I to answer on air, please email the mailbag at diabeticsdoingthings.com. So that's mailbag at diabeticsdoingthings.com. Your question will be answered on air during a special episode of the Rob and Eritrea show. So if you want to ask us a burning question and you want us to spend some time on it, please reach out to mailbag at diabeticsdoingthings.com. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diabetics Doing Things. We're telling the amazing stories of people with diabetes from all over the world. And I'm very excited to introduce our very special guest today. You know her as Mary Type 1. Mary Anderson, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. And, just a few weeks ago, we were right across the event floor from you in the Type 1 tactical booth. So very excited to finally have you on the podcast.
I'm so excited.
You don't know this, but I guess maybe Eritrea told you, but we even back to last year, we were making a big list of our favorite diabetes creators and having them on the podcast, kind of checking them off one by one. And you were the only one remaining at the top of the list that we saw. So we're finally finishing our projects from last year. So thank you. Very excited to have you on the show. So let's start where we always start. Let's talk about your diagnosis with type 1 diabetes. How did you come to join the type 1 diabetes family?
Yeah, I was diagnosed in 2018. It was my senior year of college, and my whole fall semester, it was known as a stressful semester in the education program. And it was horror stories leading up to that semester that you just hear from people. So I was like, okay, it's going to be stressful. I know that it's fine. We'll make it through. And then that semester, I just remember getting sicker and sicker and just feeling awful. But I thought it was all just because of stress. My biggest red flag was the weight loss because I was sick. I went to my campus clinic and they took my vitals, they weighed me, all that. And then I was still sick about 2 weeks later. So I went back to a different doctor and they weighed me again. And I had lost 15 pounds between those two appointments, 2 weeks apart. And I was like, okay, something's not right. But again, I was like, oh, it's just stress. I'll go home for winter break. Things will be fine. And then I just kept feeling worse and worse, all those classic symptoms. So I finally went to my family doctor. They did a bunch of tests. They took my blood pressure. They did EKG. They did urine analysis. And finally, they were like, we need to prick your finger. And I was like, okay, sure. I don't know what's going on. Go ahead. And then the nurse was like, your blood sugar's 439. And my doctor just looked at me and he was like, you're type 1 diabetic. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And so they grabbed two insulin pens, the long acting and fast acting. And they were like, all right, we're going to teach you how to give yourself shots of insulin. You're going to do this for the next week until you get in with endocrinology and you'll, learn more about it there. But here you go. This is it. I was like, okay. And then I went home and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. It was a whirlwind.
Yeah. Well, we know because we talked to so many people, as adults with diabetes, we don't get the consistent diagnosis experience, right? You literally got handed your insulin and kind of sent on your way. It's like, hey, check that in a week and everything will be fine. And knowing all you know about diabetes now and how much goes into your diabetes management, what do you think about, what was that first week like looking back?
It was crazy. So they gave me a scale of how much insulin to give myself at meals before I went to see my endocrinologist for the first time. And I remember they said, if you eat a small meal, give yourself 8 units, a medium meal, 10 units of insulin, and a bigger meal like pizza, give yourself 12 units. And that was all I had. And they were like, and then long acting, give yourself like 30 units a day. And I was like, Okay. Like I didn't, that those numbers meant nothing to me then. But looking back on it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like a small meal, 8 units. I'm like, that it just is crazy to me that I didn't have more lows than I did. But they called me pretty much every day until I got in with my endo to read my numbers. And they were like, okay, dial this back, 2 units and do this adjustment here. So, but thinking back to that, I'm like, I don't know how I made it.
That's so much
Yeah.
insulin. If you think about that,
Right.
like a small meal, like what is that? An apple, maybe a cup of coffee, some oatmeal, 8 units, seizure.
I know my normal breakfast was like scrambled eggs and like a little piece of toast. And I'm taking 8 units for one little slice of bread. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I don't think they should. I've always been of the opinion that anybody who's diagnosed diabetes should not be sent home immediately. That's always, in my opinion, jail immediately. I just don't think that it's right. You guys get this like horrific diagnosis, especially like now we have access to our phones so we can like Google it. No, this gives me anxiety. No, 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 no.
I know. And I went home and I kind of got home right around lunchtime. And so I was like, well, they didn't tell me what I'm like allowed to eat. Like, I don't know. I have diabetes. Like, what am I allowed to eat? They didn't say anything. So I'm like, I'm just going to make a sandwich. I
It's
don't know what to do.
I was thinking we've been talking a lot at the agency about girl dinner and like like the trend of like this little snacks is like, is that a small meal or is that a medium sized meal? How
Right.
many units for a girl dinner? You never know.
I
It is
know.
be it's like looking back and Eritrea, I agree with you. Obviously, like sending somebody home, and I think it often happens to adults because with kids, like there's the like really strong like pediatric endocrinology background because kids don't take care of themselves. Obviously, like they need to teach their parents too, and so like kids will stay a couple days up to a week or even in some countries like 2 weeks in the hospital where they teach you everything. But adults are like, no, no, just here's your insulin, go home 8, 10, 12, and we'll see you in a week at the endo. And it's like,
Good luck.
especially at like, taking all that insulin like early on, you're honeymooning, your body's going through a whole lot probably. And so, oh, wild. Well, glad that worked out
Yeah.
for you. So let's kind of fast forward a little bit. You were, talked about in your last semester in college getting diagnosed. So shortly after your diagnosis, like you became a teacher. So I guess what was that like making that transition? Like obviously like being a newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic and then going into your career where like you now have, I think Eritrea in our notes kind of put like one of the more like demanding, like you have to be very present. You have to be like very alert all the time. Like what was that like for you so shortly after being diagnosed?
Yeah, well, I am thankful for the timing of my diagnosis. So I was diagnosed in December and then I started student teaching in February. So I kind of had this month at home because I had moved back home for my student teaching and I had this month to kind of get my feet under me. And then going into student teaching, I was working under another teacher. So it was kind of like if I had something going on, I could kind of hand her the reins for a second while I go and like find an apple juice from my bag or that kind of thing. So it was nice to be able to figure out diabetes in teaching during my student teaching when I wasn't like the only person in the room. And that was also the same time I got my first pump and Dexcom. So I got to figure those settings out while I was in a classroom with another teacher. So I really was lucky to have that kind of grace period to figure both out together. So it made my first full year of teaching a little bit easier. I kind of got to figure out the, course of things with another teacher.
It's amazing how like people even like that don't know anything about like diabetes can become your sort of like diabetes support, like while you're and like the importance of community and like having people around you, whether they know about it or not, like just to help you ease into a very, very different, like very demanding, lots of inputs, lots of day-to-day management kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, my cooperating teacher was phenomenal. I mean, she tried to learn everything with me and she'd be like, are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you need a second? Every time my Dexcom went off because I didn't know the settings and how to make it vibrate or not beep at me when I'm high and all that. She was like, okay, what do you need? Like, what can I do? So she was great to help me kind of figure it all out.
We talked about this, Eritrea mentioned like, one of the things that people do now, and we talk about this a lot because we were diagnosed like in the early 2000s. So like Google, it's like weird to think of a time where like Google wasn't on your phone. But now, like when people are diagnosed, like one of the first things that they do is get on the internet and, learn about diabetes. They find people with diabetes and connect with them, or, look for people who do the things that they love to do. What was that journey like for you? Like, did you look for teachers with diabetes? Did you, how did that like research process go? And then like, when did you sort of identify that you wanted to share your journey with diabetes publicly?
It was pretty soon after my diagnosis, actually. So one of my really good friends, Beth, she and I went to college together. We were roommates. We studied abroad together. And she's type 1, and she's been type 1 since she was in elementary school. So when I lived with her, I knew about type 1, thankfully. And so at my diagnosis, I kind of had someone to go to and talk to and learn from. And she had a diabetes account on Instagram that I had just followed just as a friend without diabetes at the time. Just like, oh yeah, like I'll follow along and see your journey. And so when I got diagnosed, I was like, wait, now I need to actually go back and really read through her stuff. And then I saw she was connecting with other diabetics on Instagram. And so I was like, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to make an account and figure out and like find other people. So I think it's only like 2 weeks after I was diagnosed that I made my Instagram account. And I just found as many people as I could, just kind of like fell into a rabbit hole of going from this person to this person and then find this account. And I just started following so many people. I tried to search for other teachers as well. And so I would DM a lot of like any type 1 teacher I could find. I'd be like, I just got diagnosed. I'm about to start teaching. Like, what do you do? Like, what are some tips and tricks? So, and I just kind of started sharing my day-to-day stuff. I was like, what do I do when this happens? Because I was just so new to it. And then somehow over the past few years, it has just switched from me trying to learn from other people to now I'm one helping other people. And I get newly diagnosed teachers messaging me. And it's so weird how it has just transformed over the last few years.
It's cool though, because then you get to be like the person that you would have found when you were diagnosed, right? Like, and sort
Yeah.
of be that change that you want to see. Eritrea, what do we say about friends with diabetes? A friend with diabetes is a friend indeed. So shout out Beth,
Indeed.
and shout out Beth Diabetes. I've seen her in your videos, and like obviously, like having that background, like even before you're diagnosed, sharing your story with diabetes can help someone in the future. It's like you don't even know that it's going to be, one of your closest friends can benefit from you sharing your story. So I'm a big believer. Your story matters. You got to do it. You got to share it. And so shout out Beth for kind of making that journey a little bit easy for you, right? That was like a whole
Oh
lot
yeah.
easier.
She probably got sick of me that week after my diagnosis because every day I was like, what they told me to do this. What do I do? And she's like, well, what's your insulin to carb ratio? And I was like, what does that mean? I didn't say that. I don't know, 8 units. So
But
she
yeah,
helped a lot that first week.
I think I would have been mad at her. I would have been like, you gave me diabetes. I hate you. I think as a joke, no offense, diabetes. I'm sure you didn't give anyone diabetes, but I mean, it's just such a coincidence. Like, what do you mean one of my best friends has type 1 and now so do
I
I? That's
know.
wild.
I was like, you're
But
never going to believe this, but I'm now type 1 too. So how
how has you guys' relationship changed? Like, obviously you both now have diabetes, but like, especially early on, like being close friends already, and then, having something like this intimate and this personal to share with each other, like how did that like come about?
I think it's honestly made us better friends because of it. She was a year ahead of me in college. So, and she's a different major. So we never had classes together. And so we wouldn't see each other too much. We lived together for a year while we were at college. So then she had graduated. And I feel like before my diagnosis, like we'd check in with each other my senior year, but it wasn't that often. And then when I was diagnosed, it was like constant and it gave us reasons to hang out and see each other. And I think honestly, it's just kind of bonded us a lot closer. So, and she'll be a bridesmaid at my wedding next year. So she's
How
in charge of
fun.
my diabetes for the day. That's like, you know what you're doing.
How nice to just be able to pass that off to her. It's like, hey, it's on you today. We're working on it.
Yeah.
So you talked about this already about how now, you are, newly diagnosed teachers are messaging you. and, you are sharing your story publicly. You started that very soon after you were diagnosed. For those who don't know, like Mary's one of the largest like TikTokers and diabetes creators on the internet. And, I was trying to think of like a way to describe it. Like, I feel like your videos probably have more views about diabetes than probably like almost anybody else. So it's like, being able to be one of those people who introduces diabetes and type 1 diabetes to people for the first time. Like, what has that journey been like? And like, when did you realize like, oh man, like I really am like reaching a whole lot of people. And like, this is like starting to be like something that I really, pursue, not because obviously like you're still a teacher, but creating content takes time and effort and energy and strategy and thought. So, when did you really double down and like commit to, being more from Mary type 1?
Yeah, it's still hard to wrap my head around it. I still am like, no, I'm just me. Like, I'm nobody. Like, people don't know who I am. And it really didn't hit until we were at Friends for Life. And I had so many people coming up being like, oh my gosh, I follow you. Like, it's so nice to meet you. Like, it was just so weird to see people in person and people be like, I know you. Cause I can look at a number on my phone, but it doesn't really mean anything until all of a sudden I'm like meeting people. But I feel like last year was the year I really kind of put in more effort and saw things taking off a lot more. I had a deal going on with Meta and like Facebook and Instagram, and that kind of boosted my numbers a lot. And that was just really cool to see. And it's just, I don't know, it's just slowly kind of become more and more. And I get emails from different brands, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is happening. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's so surreal to me and hard to comprehend, like the reach that I have.
It's so cool though. You like you said, like when you're in person and people can come up to you, and like, especially like kids, like Friends for Life is such a cool place because there's like so many kids and teens and parents around. But that was the first time that I had been to the conference as well. So it was just neat to see like, that connection, that in-person connection. Because I think it's weird. Like I guess I've maybe shared this on the podcast before, but like Raquel type 1 day was the first person who ever recognized me in public. That like, so she just saw me. We were at like the Jewish Community Center in Dallas, and she was working out and I was playing a basketball game, and she's like, DM me is like, are you at the JCC in Dallas? And so it's like, it's really weird. Like, yeah, like, cause I'm a normal person and don't feel like, like a celebrity. And so it's just like so strange, like somebody that saw a video or a photo or a post, like can then see you in person. And it's like, and really connect that way. And now, over the years, like she went skydiving with me. Like, so it was like, we've done all these like different experiences. And so being able to like see people in person and like build real relationships just from sharing, diabetes content is really exciting. And it's really, rare and new still. Like so many people like haven't really
Yeah.
experienced that.
And it's rewarding too to like hear people's, like when we were at Friends for Life, people come up to me and be like, you really impacted my life. Like, you're the reason I got on the tandem pump, and you're the reason I got on a Dexcom, and my A1C has dropped, this by this much just because I've been following you and doing all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's crazy to hear, but it's so rewarding and so amazing to connect with people. And yeah, it's just wild to me still. I see I'm like, no, I'm nobody. I'm just me. It's, even my friends know. Like, they'll joke and they're like, oh, do you think people here follow you? And I'm like, no, like don't we're not gonna talk about it.
Do you have a favorite video, or like something that comes to mind, or like favorite piece of content that you shared?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. I feel like my classroom ones, I haven't done one in a while because it's kind of tricky to navigate. Like, I'm doing diabetes, but then it's like if it's in the classroom, like I don't want to like cross a line. But I feel like all of those are just really fun, and seeing like kids' reactions and just showing people like, yeah, I'm a teacher. Like, sometimes I have to change my insulin pump during the school day. This is what it looks like really quick. Those are always fun.
I think too, like that's a good transition because this episode, like we're getting ready for back to school, and we're a lot of parents with type 1 and students with type 1 are kind of preparing to go back to school. So for you, like, I guess like I know you shared some stories about other students of yours with type 1 or students in your schools with type 1 and the connections that you guys make. So tell me a little bit about like what that's like to be able to connect with students with type 1. And then how can you, or what are your recommendations for parents and students who are getting ready to go back to school and what they need to do, to make sure that their diabetes is taken care of, before they go back?
Yeah, so I have not had a type 1 student in my class yet. I'm like, hopefully one day I will have one. But last year there was a student at my school with type 1, and there was one day she was walking her younger sibling or younger cousin to his class, and she passed by me, and I was in the hallway greeting students coming in the morning, and I had my Dexcom on my forearm, and she saw it, and she immediately stops and looks at me. She's like, "Are you diabetic?" And I was like, "Yes. How'd you know?" She's like, "Your Dexcom, here's mine." And she had a dress on, but she like pushed in so I could see the imprint on her stomach. And so every day she would come by and say hi, and she'd talk to me like, "I'm getting an Omnipod soon. I'm so excited." I gave her little stickers to decorate her Dexcom because she had never seen them before. And I had a bunch like, "Here, take some stickers." Her parents came in around parent teacher conference time, and they actually came to my classroom to introduce themselves. And they were like, "She's told us so much about you. It's just awesome to meet someone else in the building with type 1. And the mom is also type 1. So it was fun to talk to them and connect. So that was just really special to see her every day and be able to kind of talk diabetes. I'd be like, "Oh, my blood sugar was crazy last night. How's yours?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm good." So that was really special to have that connection.
That's such a small
Um,
thing, but it makes a huge difference. I try to think of like put myself in, the shoes of like that mom with type 1 who I'm sure has a lot of like anxiety, like and parents and caregivers of kids with diabetes, like every day in the back of their mind, they're like worried about, what could happen or have we prepared everything and like is there enough insulin in the reservoir or are there enough test strips or is the meter, the CGM going to expire today or whatever the case is? Like there's so many things to balance in your mind. So just to be able to have like that reassurance that there's somebody else on campus who knows what you're going through.
right.
Yeah. What a huge advantage it is for that kid.
Yeah, and one of my best friends, she has taken the time to learn everything about type 1. Like, she's phenomenal, and she's also a teacher, but in a different district, and she texted me, and she was like, "I have a student with type 1 in my class this year." And I was like, "Oh, you're gonna do great. Like, you know so much. Like, that student is so lucky to have you as their teacher just from what she's learned." So, yeah, it's really special. But yeah, getting ready for back to school with diabetes is like a whole different beast. I feel like I have to prepare so much more because I personally make a whole kit of all my extra supplies to keep in my classroom, like low snacks, extra pump supplies, extra Dexcoms, glucagon. Um, I put extra insulin in the clinic, and I forgot that this past year, and I hit a bump in the road one day where I ran out of insulin and I didn't have an extra vial with me. And I had to go home in the middle of the school day to change my pump and go back, which was crazy. So keep extra insulin in school because that was a rough day.
I think we've all been there, right? Like where you're like at work or you're like for me, I was in an offsite meeting and I got the low reservoir warning and I was like, it was like right before lunch. I was like, great timing. Today's lunch is going to be a little bit lower carb than I had planned on.
I
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about. So, backstory. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I used to be at a campus. Like Mary knows 'cause I told her at CWD, but I used to do like teacher assisting because there was a moment of madness where I thought I wanted to be a teacher. Don't ask me. I don't know why. But I mean, I'm sure Mary does it every day. So it's very rewarding, but it's also really hard. Like watching people in the field, it's difficult. There is something about being in a campus though that like the minutes turn, like, into hours, so that's also why you have all those supplies. Do you keep any random ones in, like, random little places for yourself to, like, easy access? Because you have 5th graders, so you can't, like, take your eyes off these people, like, they're wild. So, like, what are we working with here, Mary?
I thankfully I we don't switch classes. Like, I'm in my room
Mhm.
most of the day. So I have this giant all the teachers in our classrooms have these giant wardrobes, and they have these nice little pull-out drawers inside of them. And so I have a label maker. I labeled it diabetes supplies, and I told my nurse at the school, I was like, if anything happens, this is where all my supplies are. And so I just shove everything in this drawer. And so thankfully it's easy access. If I'm teaching, I can go in there real quick and grab something, and then I keep some stuff in my teacher bag. But other than that, it's all in that little wardrobe. So pretty quick
Nicer
to
stash.
grab stuff,
Yeah.
except my students will be like, "Oh, do you need me to go get it? I can go get it." I'm like, "No, you're not."
Do not touch
Last
the
thing I need
snacks.
is you reaching in and you see a syringe or something like that's. We're not doing that. I'll get everything.
How do you approach like talking about your diabetes, like with your students? Is that something that you kind of talk about on day one when you're meeting them, or, just kind of educate them as like you're changing a site or changing a Dexcom or anything like that?
Yeah. So day one, I normally don't bring it up because it's just a crazy day in general. Like we just get them in, get them fed, and send them home on day one. It's like nothing else happened. So normally the second day of school, I will introduce it. And I have this book, Just Ask by Sonia Sotomayor. And I love it. And it explains diabetes. It explains, but then it also has like autism, ADHD, being in a wheelchair, blind, deaf, like all these different things. And it connects those differences to just everyday kids. Like, oh, do you ever take medicine when to like stay healthy? So it kind of connects like taking insulin is like my medicine to stay healthy. Do you ever take medicine? Does someone in your family ever give you medicine when you're sick? So kids can kind of relate to it. So I normally read that whole book. And plus all those differences are represented in my classroom anyway. So it's great for them, great for me. And so then I typically go back to the page with diabetes. I'm like, this page is extra special because this is, personal to me. I have diabetes. So then I show them my pump and my Dexcom and kind of explain it. Sometimes it's a lot for them to take in. So all year long, they'll ask questions. And if I'm doing a, pump change and they see it, they'll be like, wait, so what do you do again? What is your blood sugar? And so they like to kind of learn all year long. They always come up with crazy questions.
Yeah, kids' curiosity. There's never a dull moment with what they'll ask, right?
But that's
So
such a great way to do it is the book. Like they can go back, like they go home. They're like, my teacher has this. I have this. That's so smart. You're a genius, Mary. Like I would not have thought to do that.
Also,
do what we
shout out,
can.
the ultimate diabetic doing things, Sonia Sotomayor, like, Supreme Court justice,
Casually,
just casual,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We'll get her
Yeah.
on the pod. I'll read the book out loud on the pod if she'll come on. So let's make it happen. Manifest
Amazing.
it. Speak it into
Yeah.
existence. So for you, like giving advice to people who reach out to you, or even just like parents of students, we have a lot of caregivers and parents that listen to the podcast. So what advice would you have like for preparing your son or daughter or kid with diabetes to go back to school? Like what's sort of on Mary type 1's checklist?
Yeah, I feel like just having a good relationship and communication with teachers and the school nurse is like key because you're going to want to communicate. Because I have parents that will message me and be like, oh, this was happening last night in our home. Like, if, Johnny seems a little bit sadder than usual or he's quiet, like, this is why. So it helps me to know when things are going on at home and how that impacts student behavior. So I can be like, okay, they need a little more grace today. Like, if you need some time to chill, like, you take it. So I feel like with diabetes, you have a night where your blood sugar is crazy. Like I come in and I feel like I'm hungover, like from crazy blood sugar. Like it's exhausting. So if I had a student with diabetes, like I would want to know that day, like if they, are going to be a little bit more tired than usual, or if they're going to need some extra bathroom breaks or water breaks throughout the day. So I feel like communication and just having that open relationship between nurse, parent, and teacher is huge.
That's so interesting. I think like, just giving yourself context to what everyone's going through. And like, I think sometimes it can feel uncomfortable to share those moments. Like how often I think like there's the stat is like people with diabetes lose on average like 30 minutes of sleep every day. So when you start to think about like how many hours of sleep that is per year, how many per 10 years, like, and I think especially for kids who like are resting and growing and like need to, that extra rest or, need that to be their best selves. It does help so much to just be able to tell like, hey, we're going through this, or we had this difficulty last night. Yeah, that's really strong. I think I'm a huge communicator. Eritrea knows it's like, that's like my thing. I always talk about like in work. It's just like, the best ability is availability and you got to communicate all the time. And so, yeah, I think that's really, really strong advice. I think there's some other things like Eritrea has a question, I think, about like not receiving, services for kids with diabetes. Like, what would you recommend? So go ahead and ask the question, Eritrea. I'm not
I
sure if I
mean,
understand.
that's really it. I mean, basically, if you go to state school, right, you go to a school that's paid for by the government, any capacity, there are services that you are allocated as a student. And one of those services are 504. So it's like this whole file and information about you as a person who is disabled and how your teacher and the staff can help you. But so my campus was super low income, and I worked at a lot of campuses like that. And some of the kids just didn't know how to receive the services. Like they spoke English, but their parents didn't, or whatever. And a lot of the parents didn't know how to navigate that. But it's been so long since I was at a campus. So I asked the expert, Mary, because we have her here today, and she has diabetes. If you were a parent who wasn't receiving the services that you needed, where would you start to get those for your kiddo?
Yeah. So really like 504s, I would 100% recommend for a student with type 1 because it is like a legally binding contract that says, these staff members have to be educated and trained on type 1 diabetes. And like the school legally has to allow these services. So if you don't have one, I would just start by opening up that conversation with the teacher, and then they can kind of point parents in the right direction. The special education coordinators are typically the ones that will kind of get the ball rolling and reach out to parents and say, like, okay, this is what, we need to start having some meetings and talk about, what's going on, what are the accommodations and services that will benefit your child. So those are great because that can allow for extra time on assignments. It can allow for extra water breaks or bathroom breaks, needing to eat whenever or wherever you are in the school day. Um, and, if you miss a day for really, your blood sugar is super high and you're sick and you've got ketones and you need to stay home, or if you have doctor's appointments, like it can kind of allow for a little bit more excused absences in those cases. So I think they're huge. And especially with state testing, because I'm in grade levels where we have all these state tests at the end of the year. And so it can also allow, like, if you have a Dexcom, then you can keep your phone because normally its phones are off, they are silenced. No one's allowed to have any kind of devices on them, but it can allow for like your pump or your phone for your Dexcom to connect, which is huge to be able to have access to those. So 504s are amazing, highly recommend. So either teachers or, even if you just call the school, they can point you in the right directions of who to talk to get it started.
I want to piggyback on that because I think it's important exercise as a person with diabetes or a caregiver with diabetes to just get into the practice of advocating for yourself via paperwork. Because, I think we talk a lot about, even on this podcast and, in the diabetes community about all the things that people with diabetes can do. And the list is long. There's some pretty impressive accomplishments, and, shout out to people with diabetes who just really go above and beyond. But also the, you know, diabetes is protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act as a disability. And so I think that's something that even last week we were doing open enrollment for new insurance at my company. And, there was a question, it's like, do you have any disabilities? And it was kind of duplicative because there's like another section that talks strictly just about diabetes. But like I went in, I was like, yes, I live with type 1 diabetes. And so I filled out all the things. And I think it's just a good exercise to advocate for yourself because like you said, whether it's, you know, taking a state test and you're going to be testing all day and everybody else can't get on their phones, but you may need to step out, or like the SAT or ACT, you may need to step out and treat a low blood sugar, and you are protected to do that. And there are accommodations. It may feel uncomfortable. You may feel like everybody's looking at you. And I will just tell you, like, yeah, it feels really difficult in the moment, but it will pass. Everybody's worried about themselves more than they are worried about you, even when you're, in those challenging, like young adult years. But practicing advocating for yourself early and often is just a really, really rewarding thing. 'Cause you never know when you might be in a situation where you can't advocate for yourself, or you're in like a really, urgent situation where, it's important for people to know that, you need to be accommodated.
100%. Advocacy is like the biggest thing. And especially with that 504, like it's legally binding. Like if people are not following it, then you can take legal action against it. But like you have to advocate for yourself. And then when it comes to testing, it's like, I always tell my students, if you hear me beeping, you I've heard it, all year long. You need to trust that I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to be like, oh, Miss Anderson, like I heard it. We've heard it all year long. Just know I'm just going to grind my juice and sip it. Don't let it, distract you from doing what you need to do. So same thing with the student. It's like if they, need to go out for breaks throughout the whole school year, then it's like hopefully those kids know like it is what it is. Just they've got it covered. Not it's going to be like a huge distraction, and it shouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Feel like they need to go, take care of their health.
I also think that kids with type 1 just need a little bit of extra love and care. Like,
Yeah,
I just think that as a person who was a small child with diabetes, I remember feeling like I was annoying the teachers with like, oh, I need this, I need that. And if they wouldn't have known, and there was a couple who didn't know and like were later sat down and were like, no, you can't tell your trash, you can't go to the bathroom. Like, that's not legally allowed. Stop doing that. That file just helps. So if you're a parent, you don't know what that is, like Mary said, reach out to your teacher, reach out to your campus, find out what you can do to get your kiddo the stuff that they need, because that is a really crappy situation to be in as a little kid, and to be like, I can't go to the bathroom because I'm gonna get in trouble, or I can't eat my snack and I'm gonna get in trouble, and your parent's not there. So sometimes I even think that like kids with type 1 were kind of born into that advocacy role because you're by your school at your school by yourself. Like, your parents are
yeah.
not there with you. So yeah, really important that we highlight that, and I'm glad we got to talk about it because it means a lot to me. I was a 504 kid, so yeah.
Well,
I
we
know it's
talk a
weird
lot.
for me because I didn't go to school with diabetes. So it's like a whole different perspective for me. It's like I never had to go through it myself, but I know as a teacher, like if I was a parent, then it's what I would want for my child.
There's just a stigma. It's weird. So this is the last thing I'll say about it. When I was at a campus, I remember very distinctly once that there was a lady who told me, and she didn't know I had diabetes, but I've always been the way that I am. I have the personality that I have, and she was like, you know what? You seem like you used to be a 504 kid. And I just looked at her and I was just like, is that supposed to be derogatory that I have a disability? And she just looked at me like she had no idea. Like she messed around and found out that day. But there is a stigma around it. And that is so weird to me. Like, grown-ups bullying little kids. And that's a real thing. So I don't say that to scare parents. I don't say that to put them on the edge, but just like be aware that some people don't know anything about diabetes and don't understand why people are given accommodations and are like weirdly jealous about it. And that's them, and that's fine. But just set your kid up so that they have the resources that they need and the legal protection that they deserve at a campus when you're not around.
I would even go further and say that most people don't know anything about diabetes. I think that's why
Yeah.
diabetes creators are so important because, you never know when one individual story kind of cuts through, whether, cuts through as a message or really resonates with somebody in a way that, even if they had seen other videos or other information, like it just never connected with them before. So I think diabetes awareness, like we talk a lot about diabetes stigma on this podcast and in the community, but for the most part, like stigma is the only awareness about diabetes that most people have because they don't have someone in their life with diabetes and they haven't been diagnosed with diabetes and, they don't encounter it. They don't have a friend with diabetes. And so, advocating for yourself, like you said, you're not only, I think we talk a lot about it in the community, like kind of jokingly, like full-time job and like you're managing and doing all the work of the pancreas, but you really are. And also you need a little bit of extra grace and a little bit of extra help. And you shouldn't like look down on yourself for that. I think like asking for help is a sign of strength. It's not a sign of, of weakness. And you get better at it too. It's a practice skill, I think, and I think like starting with the 504 is great because then you have that legal binding document that protects you and you can kind of grow from there. It really does have that strong foundation. And yeah, shame on people who talk down to kids for, you know, opting into their, like what they're legally able to do.
Yeah. I
Um,
always hope that my students, for what I teach them about diabetes, that when they get older and they go into the world and they see, insulin pumps and CGMs, that they'll just have that better understanding and acceptance and be like, oh, yeah, like I have that teacher that had that. So that's my hope. But less stigma. I try to teach them because they're always like, well, how did you get diabetes? And then, they already, even third grade, they know the stigma behind, oh, you ate too much sugar. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to stop you right here. We're going to talk about it. So hopefully they'll go into the world and make it a little bit better for us.
Kind of like each one teach one though, right? Like, that's your chance. Like diabetes awareness kind of happens one person to one person and, they'll never forget it. So, that's I think really important. Mary, I do want to ask you kind of like just what's something that you're looking forward to, or like what's something that, going into next school year that you're, hoping to accomplish for yourself or for your students, or like what's something that you have, that's kind of down the horizon that you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm moving into a new grade level. So I've been in third grade the last 4 years. So it's my first year of teaching fifth grade. So I'm just excited to teach a new age group, learn some new content, gotta, learn that fifth grade math. So I'm just excited for just a new change in what I've been teaching. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, shout out to all of our adults, parents, teachers out there doing that fifth grade math and beyond, because I haven't had to think about that kind of math in a long time.
Same. I'm like, oh, multiplying and dividing decimals and fractions. Oh, I gotta
I'm gonna age us,
relearn a lot of it.
Rob and I probably did math like in those old school like projectors. Remember those projectors, Rob, where they would like write in
I remember
and they're
a transparency, dude. Absolutely.
yeah, dude, those are so cool. And y'all don't have those anymore. If you're a kid listening to this, that sucks for you. I thought those were
It was always so fun to be chosen to clean it and you get to turn it and clean off everything that was on there.
This is my
So
favorite thing about
satisfying.
American school. Yeah, I loved American school. Like, I came from another countryside. It's like, oh my gosh, lockers. Oh my gosh, they do this transparency thing. Oh my gosh. So now when I think about teachers, I'm like, they don't have all the cool stuff that when I came to America,
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, like at the agency, because like we're presenting on TV or over Zoom, and we've got like moving slides and videos and like cool like images. And it's just like, man, like 25 years ago, it was just like a transparency screen and someone with a marker, you're like sketching it in real time. It's like we come a long way.
Oh yeah. All these new fancy Promethean boards. I'm like, this is like a giant tablet in the front of my classroom. Like, this is insane to me. It's really cool.
It is. Well, Mary, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and spending time with us. I know that our listeners are going to get a lot out of like the back to school vibe and how to prep. Obviously, they can reach out to you on Instagram or TikTok at Mary Type One. And I'm just excited to meet you and like finally cross you off our diabetes creator list. Like we completed the list from 2022. So that was a big win for us just internally. But thank you for all that you're doing for people with diabetes and educating and creating awareness and community. It's really cool to meet you and be a part of the diabetes community with you.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. And I'm sorry I missed the message to come on the podcast. And I saw it after Friends for Life and went, oh, I never responded.
It's
I'm glad we
can find.
make it happen.
I was making fun of
I would-
Eritrea. I was like, oh, yeah, she saw you. She's like, oh, this must be personal. It must be personal. She doesn't want to get
But
back.
now we gotta, she's like, now I have to go to the pod. This girl's gonna fight me. No. But no, first of all, thanks for coming. But also one last thing that I also want to make happen is Mary has a really great, my mom's a teacher, so I have a lot of love for teachers. And Mary has an Amazon wish list out right now. So if you'd like to donate to her classroom, please check out her Instagram. The link is in her bio. And we'll also list it in our show notes because we want to give back to Mary's classroom and help teachers like her. Teachers are severely underpaid in this country and deserve all the flowers and recognition. And I cannot say that enough. So yeah.
And what a cool story. Like if the diabetes community could, be a helper to a teacher with diabetes and like, what that goes and what that does for students. I think like there's such a huge part of community. I don't know, like if listeners are avid elementary fans, but like, how like that type of, thinking and people who are not just teachers, but also creators are using that platform to create more opportunities for tomorrow's youth. So, I mean, if you can't get behind that, what can you support? You know what I mean?
Right.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mary. And we'll include all those links in the show notes and we'll see you guys next